Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure many of you, being plugged into the internet, recognise this fella. He's a young activist known as Ryan Williams, and he goes by the handle Korean Scott on X. He's been doing the rounds lately because he's quite outspoken against the religion of peace, and he's just been detained when he landed at London's Heathrow airport on Monday after doing the rounds abroad. I think this image is on Sky News Australia. He was detained under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act due to his social media posts criticising the regulars at the snack bar and mass immigration. Officers questioned him for many hours, seized his phone, his laptop and his bank details, and then released him pending further inquiry. Now, the reason I picked Mr. Hamza, everybody's favourite cycloptic hook-handed cleric there, for the thumbnail was very deliberate, because terrorism has a very specific meaning to the general public. And the reason the general public was willing to get on board with these massive overreaches against personal liberty and the suspension of habeas corpus and the like is because terrorism is so dangerous and vile, typically ending up with women and children scattered across the sides of pop concerts and the like. That's such an awful, monstrous thing that the general public was willing to tolerate massive overreaches against our personal freedoms in order to keep children safe. I mean, you can't say fairer than that, can you? We're all willing to give them a little bit of extra leeway if it means little girls like Safi don't get their lives ended by Libyan terrorists that the British government purposely imported to the UK, even though they knew they were terrorists. And then we paid for all their food, clothing and shelter for 22 years before they kill everyone. Yeah, that's why we're willing to tolerate it. However, the headlines about this are a bit ridiculous. For example, the summation of this on X, it just sounds a little bit milquetoast to someone like me that, you know, respects freedom and individual liberty. The case mirrors the recent acquittal of activist Tony Romo on similar charges, raising questions about the application of counterterrorism laws to online expression. Raising questions, eh? Yeah, I've got a question. How is it that a bloke who cracks jokes on the internet is detained under terrorism laws because he cracks jokes on the internet, and a bloke like Abu Hamza, there we are, this fella, lost his hand and his eye and got a severe limp from fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, so a member of the Mujahideen? How come he could move to the UK and spew vitriolic hatred for over a decade before the British authorities did anything about it? Why is that? Why is it that they can nick you for being a terrorist if you crack jokes that Starmlin and his chums don't like, but if you openly advocate for running into packed pop venues with a hissing backpack and scattering yourself and 200 women and kids up against the walls, the British government will tolerate that for decades? How is that? How is that? Well, you know how it is. It's because we've got Shabana Mahmood.
Some of it was fun.
In charge of crime and punishment in the UK. Might I suggest that calling people who make quips on the internet terrorists is a little bit of an overreach? Okay, I'm going to do this monologue under the shadow of Abu Hamza's glorious visage, just to remind you with what you're dealing with here. This is lunacy. Nobody in the right mind thinks that blokes like Ryan Williams should be detained. Nobody thinks that. He goes on Sky News and he says things that the general public agree with, and using that flimsy premise, I mean, it's not even a flimsy premise, it's a non-existent premise, and using it, they can detain you under anti-terror legislation. Legislation that, again, the general public thinks is there to stop mass murderers. It's not to stop people who make quips, and this is demonstrative of the real rot in the United Kingdom. It's that the people who run the show subscribe to this weird Fabian commie gibberish worldview, which says that the people who have a little bit of a tan, the people who were recently introduced to the United Kingdom, can never be seen to be the criminals. And again, I'm sick of saying this, but the British government is using all of the most famous tropes from like Demolition Man and George Orwell and Solzhenitsyn. And essentially they're using this stuff as like a guide manual for how to run a country. If you look hard enough, you can always find a quote from the great writers of history that sums up exactly what they're doing. And one of my favourite ones from Solzhenitsyn perfectly encapsulates what they're doing, almost to a T. There's one of his most famous ones. Your punishment for having a knife when they searched you would be very different from the thief's. For him to have a knife was mere misbehaviour, tradition. He didn't know any better. But for you to have one, that's terrorism. So think of that. We're worse than communist Russia. We're worse because they'd lock you up on a flimsy premise because you had a knife. They wouldn't lock you up on a flimsy premise because you occasionally said things that everybody in the general public agreed with. What is this? And I'll just play you a little clip of him just to show you the type of stuff he says. The totally normal, perfectly reasonable things that he says.
People need to hear this from a foreign face like mine. The news needs to stop referring to this guy as British. He is Pakistani. Even I'm hesitant to call myself fully British. British Korean makes more sense to me. There's this nonsense I hear about mass immigration being the fault of colonization and the British Empire was evil. This rhetoric must stop immediately. Why are we not taught about the incredible sacrifices that the British Empire made? I love the British phrase, warts and all. It means you accept the good and ugly together and embrace it. The British Empire stopped slavery in 1807, led by William Wilberforce, sacrificing thousands of soldiers to stop the slave trade of the French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Arab empires. Then Britain made her final sacrifice fighting World War I and II for global freedom, effectively dismantling her empire. I can't honestly think of a more heroic end and legacy to any empire. And to people like him, leave the goats alone.
There you go. There you go. Leave the goats alone. It seems reasonable. Although I will say, Ryan, they do not like being referred to as Pakistani. That's not on that. They much prefer the term Puma Tracky or like Joe Dacky. I think he was a singer the like or something. Anyway, yeah, that's it. He basically makes slightly critical videos. So if he's getting nicked for being a terrorist and the process is the punishment, they lock him up for hours, they steal all of his devices, they take his bank details, basically they mug him. They mug him at the airport. Fine. Just stitch you up, rob you soon as you land, even though you're a British citizen. It's unbelievable. They all complained about George Bush suspending habeas corpus. The UK government, the tyrannical, overbearing psychopaths that run the UK, have turned it into a full-blown dystopia. I guarantee George Orwell, in his wildest dreams, didn't think they'd be locking up patriotic young lads like that. It's unbelievable. So, and this is the kicker, I'm a British citizen who spent 10 years in the military fighting for my country. I did 5 tours, and now I'm scared. Well, not scared. Don't want to sound like a pansy. I'd happily go to prison. Yeah, I'd be the daddy. Easy. I've seen scum. I know how it works. Just stick an iron bar up your sleeve when you go to talk to a big black fella in his dungarees. They all wear dungarees. And give him the good news. You're in charge. I'm not worried about going to prison, but I would prefer to avoid it. Okay? So when a man who was born and raised in the UK and spent the first 35 years of his life there and served his country, when I travel back to the UK now, I leave my British passport here, I pay for a visa, and I fly home on my US passport, praying that that gets me some more brownie points. And if they arrest me for no reason for telling jokes on the internet and being slightly critical of an ideology that promotes throwing acid in the face of women that spurn you. Yeah? Because funny old thing, George and Hilda weren't throwing acid in each other's faces back in the 1950s. So that's like an imported problem. Yeah? Female genital mutilation didn't happen in the 1950s. No, absolutely zero women got the piss flap sawed at with a sharp stone in the 1950s. These are imported problems. So logic dictates that liberal, dare I even say, feminist people would complain about it. So this young chap makes jokes about goats and promotes liberal talking points that say we shouldn't treat women like second-class citizens. And the authoritarian scum that rule the UK with an iron fist have locked him up for it. Right? So me, man who served his country, my British passport's worthless to me. If it wasn't for the fact they owe me a military pension, I'd set it on fire, right? And I'm going to have to travel as an American, shave my head, go on the tanning tubes for 10 days, and hope that because I'm going to be walking through arrivals with a head like one of Donald Trump's testicles, that I get away with it. It's preposterous. People that have served the country, proud citizens with no criminal records in the 40s, shouldn't be worrying about landing in the country that spawned them. That's how authoritarian the United Kingdom is. I'm paying for a visa. Think of that. But if you disagree and you think he definitely deserved nicking because he, advocates liberal principles like not melting women's faces off with battery acid, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments so I can flag you to the authorities, and they'll probably give you a medal or something, won't they? They'll give you the keys to the city if you have the exact same political opinions as Osama bin Laden. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today, ladies and gents. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all tomorrow. Toodle pip. Cheers.